Good morning. Welcome to the conversation, Unscripted. I am Ruth Evelyn, and Mary Holden is my co-host, but Mary is out of town today, and she's traveling. So we have a guest co-host, Molly Wavra. Today is November 19th, 2015, and I would like to introduce Molly in a very unique way, in a way that I've never introduced anyone. We are going to talk about her ethereal credentials before we actually talk to her. Molly has been a high priestess in the Ascended Realms, and she has a unique skill of communicating with and working with children. And Molly's heart is, I want to cry, I'm getting very emotional. This is very interesting. Molly's heart is incredibly expansive, and the level of pink energy, the vibration, the frequency of her, what is being called elemental agreements is quite high. It's one of the highest frequencies that you will encounter in a human body. And with that, we would like to bring Molly on. Molly Wavra, welcome to the Conversation Unscripted.
Hi, Ruth. Wow, I wasn't expecting that resume. I've never heard that before.
Well, and it's now documented and recorded and archived. So.
Oh, wow, you started me off just like with my jaw on the floor. So thanks. It's a delight.
So now, thank you. So now tell us a little bit about your human experience in present day.
Well, I've never used the word priestess to refer to myself, so that's interesting. My walk as of now is really working with people on the many levels of their body, the physical body, their subtle bodies, to the way I often put it is be delivered back to the truth that they are. So that has looked many ways throughout my professional walk, everything from personal trainer and nutrition coach to kind of this umbrella that I have now over the work I do to help people kind of unlock patterns that keep them stuck and held into denser patterns of behavior and bridging that back into their true essence.
So how does that look in, I know that this is kind of a vague question, and I know that it has to get kind of a vague answer because every person, every situation is individual and unique. But generally, how does that work in a session with you and your, I was going to say guest, your client?
Well, that has shifted because I used to actually have a bit of an insecurity about the fact that I never quite knew what was going to happen in a session. And I've come to realize that really that is the being present piece. To really, when you open that field with someone and they open their field to you, it's really an honoring of what is present that wants to be worked with. So that's the space that I hold. It can often arise in dialogue as, you know, obviously whatever someone's working with, whether they're working with maybe an eating disorder or an emotional pattern or trying to figure out what they want to do with their life and their work, or, you know, so it can look that way. It can sound that way in dialogue. From the orientation that I hold the space, it's holding that field of presence to integrate and metabolize that which wants to be integrated.
I like the way that you put that, metabolize that. That really, that's huge layers of transmutation and shifting. That's an incredible viewpoint in practical terms of how the shifting happens within the human system and goes through a dimensional process.
Yeah. It's something that, it's one of those ahas in the last few years for me that you always knew you were doing, but then to bring it into a more mechanistic form. And so often what is used, what is the function, is people and their triggers. So I get very enthusiastic when someone is willing to work with their triggers, because whenever our fight or flight is activated around something that is not truly threatening our physical survival, there's very interesting information there. And there's a lot of held debris that wants to be metabolized and transmutated.
Yes. And that's interesting to be working specifically with the blocks. With it, what they're showing me is it's the accumulated energy, like plaque in the arteries, and it's accumulated and it's cut off an energy flow, and it's centuries of plaque infested genetics.
Yeah, it really, and that's why I love that the science is catching up now and showing how our DNA is altered by trauma, and finally recognizing that it is not only individually held trauma but collectively held trauma that is being pathologized, in our medical system, and it's to me, it's these pathways back towards the truths of a holistic reality, of a holistic body that we are, both individually and collectively.
It is, and I think it's amazing that like you said, the science is coming in. Years ago when I was when I wrote my first book, An Unseen Life, at the end there's a statement in there about how religion and science and philosophies, all of these are coming together into a level of agreement. And at the time when I wrote that, it was a knowing truth, but it certainly wasn't evidential in our society. And that really actually was only in 2007. So not that long ago. And now it's very obvious that science and philosophy, religion, medicine, all of these are coming into really a unique awareness of the connectivity and, in putting together the main idea for the Friendly Mind Project. The Friendly Mind Project is a documentary that I will eventually be putting together. It has started coming together, but I'm bringing together science, medicine, psychology, and spirituality into one documentary, and showing how we are speaking the same. We're saying the same things. Even though we're talking different languages, we are saying the same things. And the whole point of the project is for people to comprehend their own system, their own body, and as a congruent unit to help calm the mind, to bring it into more of a friendly nature. And with that, we will have more productive individuals, more productive communities, more productive families. So that's the point of the project. And I think it's in light of the challenges that are going on around the planet right now, is that contrast of the headway we have made in bringing together our unity. And so I know some people are really stuck on the disasters, focusing on the difficulties. But there's a huge group of us that are focusing on the beingness, and that's what's surfacing all this other stuff.
Exactly. And that's again, I quite often use the template of the body, both our physical body and our subtle energy bodies, as the template from which I understand and extrapolate understanding the collective body, just because that's what's most familiar and comfortable to me. But what I believe to be true and have witnessed to be true in myself and others is that when the frequency, to use that language, increases through the shared experience of love and the very integral, real oneness that it is to be human with all of humanity. So as that field grows, just like, okay, I'm going to go back and forth here. So in the collective, as consciousness is expanding and growing and allowing that frequency, those more exalted energies to expand, now I'll come back to the human level, just like when we fall in love, for example. When we fall in love, there's this huge rush. There's brain chemistry that changes, the emotional field, things just move, and we have this positive association. But what we also know is true is that brings up all our stuff. That because we're exploded open, we are also very quickly, usually, acutely aware of our vulnerability. And so that brings up all the protective mechanisms and all, and you can just plot, the average falling in love relationship along that spectrum. And either we choose to own our own stuff and take care and work with in a compassionate way those defenses we've created against that overwhelming experience of love, even though it's counterintuitive, or we shut down. So I feel like collectively, to use pain collectively the same way it can be productively used in the body is really important right now. And that's what I would love to talk about, actually. I think it's such an important piece of our evolution, both individually and collectively, to reacquaint ourselves, to reframe and rework our notions of pain.
Yes. Oh, the door is open. What would you like to say? That is awesome. Yes.
Yes. I would love to explore, again, this mechanism that pain is, again, both physically, emotionally, and mentally, that full spectrum of pain, from horrific violence to, again, that spectrum of pain as an evolutionary mechanism. And what can, the channel that you are, the information that you're here to provide, like, let's go there.
It is definitely a huge teacher. One of the things, and I excuse the pause, the mumbling, and the giggle. I have a lot of entities that want to talk. Everybody's like, okay, let's go. So let's kind of calm this energy down and bring it down into one person at a time. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the individual relationship. Because this is where we'll just start with that. The individual relationship. Personally, in my experience, when as the expansion is expanded and then becomes the new normal, and you relax into that new normal, and then life expands again. And what happens now is that the goodness is so good that it's a new experience. And because it's a new experience, there's the cautionary tale of, the old saying of it's too good if it's it's too good to be true, or if you become too happy, watch out because you got sadness coming around the corner. Those kinds of things don't have to happen. And that resistance to and believing in the good that is present. And one of the things that has been problematic in at least one relationship that I've had that was really, really good, is being a runner, because it was so good. And so it's like, you don't want to fall too far into the relationship because you don't want to get caught and tangled up in something you can't get out of, or that's difficult to get out of. And so there is that cautionary tale. And so there's the old information of the old platform, the old layer that you've been in that no longer suits you, going into this new experience that is really good, but it's such a contrast from what was. And so there's this process of integrating yourself into the new layer and letting go of what no longer serves you. And that can be painful, because the friendships that were in that old layer no longer, unless the friendship grows, it doesn't pertain to the new space. And so there's letting go of friendships, there's letting go of love, there's letting go of things that you like, there's letting go of locations, there's just letting go. And it's and we focus so hard on the letting go that we forget to embrace. And so then that, because the system, the electromagnetic system, is continuing movement, it's pushing you into this new phase. And so because that push becomes a big push because you're spending too long in the old space, you get ripped away from your old life and put into your new life. And that is uncomfortable and painful.
Indeed.
It's emotionally painful. And when you're moving into that new frequency, it's a physical change in your cellular structure, in your cellular tissue. It's a new frequency. It's a new energy. And so physically it hurts, because physically you're taking old information out and putting new information in. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. So I can speak for myself and know many, many others who have, especially in the last several years, been going through those transitions in profound and dramatic ways. So I think there's definitely agreement around that experience. Would you agree? Is there agreement as well that is also at the collective level what we're experiencing?
Yes. It's escalated. And here's why it has escalated. When you have billions of people on the planet that are in the old paradigm, and the awakening happens in droplets around the planet within individuals, and then the internet happened. And these individuals became groups. And evolution in the last few years, these collective groups have collected further, coagulated, pooled more. And so what that does is that creates, because the increase in these collected groups of people who are now no longer keeping their voice quiet, they support one another, so there's a safe space to speak, and then that voice gets heard in the surrounding areas, the surrounding energies. And surrounding energies can be a phone call, can be a conference call, can be, it can be anywhere. It can be around the planet. Surrounding energies is whatever it is you're connected to. Mm-hmm. And so as these conversations, you've heard the 100th monkey theory is when 99 monkeys are doing something and that 100th monkey does it as well, it becomes automatic in the consciousness. And so what has happened over these last really 5 years has been a tremendous increase in the momentum and speed of the collective nature moving forward into its new paradigm. So what is that new paradigm? And we spoke last show about, the world being more gracious and more kind. And that is the new paradigm. I think it was Sonia Choquette. I really cannot recall the specific name. Started with an S, but one of the psychics predicted that by 2050 we will have 2050 we will have live in a kinder world, and that is what's happening. Is that we are moving into this new platform, this new expansion. Well, in the physical body, and we know that you've experienced this yourself, Molly and Ruth, and with your clients, that as in the physical body, when you move through a resistance, when you hit a wall, when you hit that block, there is that block either dissipates gradually or bursts apart. And right now, we're in a bursting apart. And that's where you're seeing the physical violence. You're seeing more dramatic weather patterns. You're seeing more dramatic shifts in the tectonic plates. And things are just being more dramatic. And that's a twofold operation/process benefit in that it breaks apart a lot of energy at the same moment. It gets people's attention, and it's shifting the mindset out of the old paradigm for people to turn their heads and look in the new direction. And, of course, the new direction is, of course, forward, but it's internally forward first, before it can be externally forward.
Yes.
And so the work that... Yeah, go ahead.
And that is, as people are so, just in my Facebook posts and my class that I teach, and I've been trying to encourage people to just acknowledge that we're impacted by these ripples, by this, just start there. Just acknowledge your pain, your discomfort with what's happening, because what we see is that discomfort, and then the knee-jerk reaction is to try to solve the problem at this level of fear, as opposed to just as when we are working with our own emotional discomfort, it's like that same mechanism works of going, like, what's really happening here? Like, staying with your actual powerful experience, right, and allowing that to work through so that you can stay in your center and be what you're here to be in the world, to continue that forward expansion, that evolutionary expansion. And I feel like there's so many people who I mean, it's horrifying to see. I don't watch the news, but we are so inundated with so much information that paints the picture that impacts our story and our, collective. And again, so just what I'm trying to come to is what you said is going inward. And instead of that frenetic need to make it different, and help people understand, like,
being in this in your beingness is where the solution orientation is.
Agreed.
When you are sitting in the problem, and the problem is larger than who you are, appears larger than who you are, and that's all you see is the problem. You are in the problem and creating more, you're feeding the problem. You're creating more nourishment for the problem. When you step outside the problem is when you can look at something and discern what your role is and be the solution. Solutions are discovered from within, and that as that light comes up through the body, it comes up into the perineum, into the enteric brain region, which is where there are more neurotransmitters to both nurture your body, to nurture your brain, to communicate with, and it's a pure information. It's connected in with your light quotient. It's connected in with the collective information. That knowing is your knowledge, where you get your knowledge. It is the best education system you will ever, ever, ever come across, and it's free.
Absolutely agree.
And
totally.
So completely getting into that, and of course going to healers, light workers, those people who can teach you how to move that energy and activate and open up to your own beingness is where you will discover. Those are your academic fees. They're calling them.
I like that. I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
It's an education system, and really
exactly.
The quality. They're saying that the quality of healers nowadays that are attuned with this movement, this paradigm, are not looking for followers. They're not looking to be your guru. They are looking to move this energy through, and that's their purpose. And it's like before we can be in the experience of collective peace, this group that's on the planet right now is like the street cleaners, and cleaning out the ditches, cleaning out the streets, and preparing the way. And so there's a movement of shifting and energy, and the teams, we send people to you to move this energy through, and to send the clients on. And so clients go on to the next level, and of course it would be wonderful if everyone would just reach inside and discover who they are and connect with their true nature. But there's still so much stickiness in the old genetic coding that
that's why I believe we have to use the body.
Viable at this moment.
Well, and we have to to do it to the body. There's so much of like spirituality and has has, in my opinion and in my experience with working with people, done a great disservice to our embodiment. Because it, like you said, that enteric brain, that the body is the mechanism by which we come back into center and open to our essence. Like, you can't leave that part out.
You can't. I had an experience, Molly, this last week. I don't know, sometime in the last 10 days. And it's brought a new level of communication within my own system, in that, in coming together and becoming the person that I designed myself to be in this planet, in this lifetime, in this now, in coming into that place of becoming who I am and who I designed myself to be. What happened after that is hearing the communication of the physical body and the light, and the cooperative listening of the mind, of the high brain. So for the last 10 days or so, I've been in this process of actually being acutely aware of that conversation going on in the moment. And what that looks like is going about and doing a task, and then suddenly hearing the body and the light, the electromagnetic field, communicating with each other, and the mind saying, okay, we're done, time to go on to the next one. And it's a cooperative system. And to be living in this acute awareness is very different. It's also very doable now and on the planet. And, there are people around the world who do live like this. And so it's not something that's a theory or a dream, or, where we are now moving into a phase, into lives, and have generations already birthed on this planet where this totality of communication between the body, the light, and the mind are present in everyday functioning.
Yes. Which is why I think that some of the more rigid structures mechanisms by which that communication took place previous are no longer particularly viable for many.
Well, they're not.
Yes?
They're not viable for anyone anymore, and that's why we're seeing the violence. That's why it's coming out in a world of violence, because that goes into the collective body, the collective light, the collective mind. And so there's this fierce territorialism that's happening. Yes. It's like being in a very, very large, long process of clearing a blockage. And that clearing is happening. It's coming. We're going to see the clearing. We're going to see it
right
in the not too distant future.
Right. I often will tell people, if you could watch the immune system attack and destroy a virus in the body, and you could watch that at such a level that you personified it, it would look very violent. It would look
precisely.
Like war. And so again, to use the body to extrapolate that out, it's like there's a certain allowing of this process and stripping the emotion away so we can allow the evolutionary process to take place and play our role effectively with our consciousness, with our behaviors, and continuing to do our own work, continuing to be the vessels that we're here to be these venting mechanisms for the release you're talking about. It's like I think that when things get scary, there's this recoil and this fear that continuing to move towards our own path and do our work and move towards our own individual evolution is somehow selfish. And so there's this pause in people who are being called to do this work. There's this pause and there's a little bit of recoil to being asked to trust that, yes, this is the work. This is what the work looks like. Even when there's bombs going off and, things are collapsing, keep doing the work.
Being a screenwriter, I study shows, and some of the shows that I study are violent shows. I mean, I just went through a marathon series of watching Covert Affairs, and without going into my opinion or the detail of Covert Affairs as a study, I looked at that and compared it with the light system and what the light and someone's self must do in order to wake them up and get them out of patterns to bring them into well-being, because the light and the higher self is really all about, let's get into well-being. Well, humans don't know what well-being is.
I agree.
They have no clue the great lives that they could live, the kindness that they could live, the nurturing relationships they could have. And they have little clue. They have an idea. They know it exists, so we keep going after it, but we're going after it in the wrong way, in a deliberately debilitating way, is what I'm being told. So, in waking your own individual beingness and bringing you out of that stupor of self-abuse, your system goes through a process of covert actions to bring you in front of people, to bring you situations, to design your life so that you start making choices of, you start seeing patterns, and when you say enough, that's when your team feels that they have been successful. And that is enough to the violence, because we are our own self-abusers. And we are setting bombs off in our own lives all the time.
I agree.
We're really good at killing ourselves and destroying ourselves in so many ways and so many layers. And yet we look out at the violence outside of us and think that that's horrible, but we say nothing to the self-abuse that we're giving to ourselves.
Exactly.
And, so going back inside and cleaning up our own beingness, our own internal Armageddon, which people are afraid to look at.
Exactly.
And you said something very interesting earlier about, that insecurity of not really knowing what the process was and not really feeling sure. For anyone on these journeys, that's natural. That's normal. And to, like Molly said, look at your pain, look at that insecurity, look at what you're afraid of, and make friends with that process, because if you weren't capable and able and designed to do this kind of work or any kind of work, you wouldn't be in that moment of meeting that insecurity.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's that trusting that what arises is precisely valid. That doesn't mean we like it. And I think that's where people get in trouble. Like, they want awakening to feel really good. Like, they have it confused with bliss, And it's quite a bit less attractive than that.
I think that's an important part of the conversation is expectations.
Oh my God, yes.
There's this combination of lowering your expectations yet keeping the high expectations so that you actually get to your goal, but you know, we have these I want to call them fairy tale images that actually do exist in our plan because that's what we're aiming for. At the same time, it's a process and it's a frequency level. So in order to reach that, to meet that destiny, you must clear out all of this internal turmoil to be living at that level of frequency to meet those dreams and desires and relationships. And to be in those relationships, to be able to honor yourself to be in those relationships. Because it's not about honoring the relationship, it's about honoring yourself, and that matches the relationship.
Yes.
But it's not an overnight thing.
And no, it seems ongoing. It seems, it just seems like breath. It just seems cyclical. You know,
there's a constant movement, and even when you get to those dreams and desires and goals, there's still going to be other, you know, more expansion, because, you know, look at a billowing cloud, look at electricity, things. Light is constantly moving. This is about movement and expansion. But when you get to a phase, when you get to a completion and you get into what you expect to be, you know, paradise, and it's not paradise, don't forget to look at what you've accomplished and be well with what you've accomplished, and look at those achievements and be. They're saying be proud of what you've done. Be aware of what you've done. Celebrate and be joyful in what has been accomplished. And then when you come to love the process, everything shifts into a smoother eloquence. There is, you know, we still don't always like it, but it's
just uncomfortable.
A greater understanding.
I mean, I think that even when you've done your work and you can acknowledge how far you've come, there's this discomfort because we've spent so much of our history attuned to our story, attuned to that energy that when it opens up and there's that expansion and there's that space, it's not that we miss it. It's just kind of like, now what? You know, so what I try to prepare clients for often is that when stuff moves, so like when I'm working with someone, I often experience their blocks in my body. I tend to be very clairsentient in my body. And so I know when stuff is moving, like really moving. And so I try to explain that, okay, in that space that's been created, it is as though there is a vacuum there, and it will try to fill itself. So the encouragement and invitation is to just allow there to be space there. And that's more challenging than one might think.
It is. There have been times when there actually have been a couple of times that I have met this space of boredom. And it's natural because you have worked, like you said, you've worked so hard, and then you get to the space and it's like, okay, well, you know, now what? You know, nothing is entertaining you, nothing is interesting, nothing is, you know, everything's just flat. And it really doesn't last very long. So just be in that space. And, you know, you achieve a goal, and sometimes I've looked around going, well, did I really want this goal? Because this doesn't feel joyful.
Right.
You know, and yes, it does. It's a new energy. It's like you know, that momentum that has just stopped. It's as if the Earth were to be turning in one direction and suddenly turning in the other direction. There's a stopping point, and then it has to reverse course. So it's just a pause. It's just a pause.
Right.
And very few people talk about that. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Really glad.
Well, and it's that space in which, even at a biological level, I work with, breaking up patterns. So it's that pause. It's in that space where we give ourselves the opportunity to choose differently. And so we can actually alter the neural pathways that have been programmed based on past trauma, based on past patterns. And there has to be that space to allow that new choice, that new experience. Otherwise, the mind just scrambles and so wants to interpret things. It only has the past to refer to.
And that's true, and it wants
body.
to start refilling that space with what it knows. That's really true, and that's why going in with the enteric brain and getting more acquainted with the enteric brain is really, really valuable. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked with with cancer patients, and how would we? I'd like to dialogue a little bit on how to guide a cancer patient in working holistically with that cellular structure within their body, where it's attacking and trying to fight itself off and that kind of thing. Have you ever had that experience?
Well, I've not worked directly as a practitioner with someone working with their cancer per se. I've worked with cancer survivors. My mother died of cancer a few years ago.
Okay.
So what came up as you were asking the question was my approach would be consistent in that my encouragement would be for anyone, no matter what pathology they find themselves working with, to explore their relationship with their body, and explore that first. What they believe to be true about their body.
It's very interesting because I feel like we've been set up. We're going to talk about this.
Okay.
What we recommend is to use that process that you use in communicating specifically with the cells, with the cellular structure. And go below that. Go into the molecular structure and communicate with that as well. In communicating with the RNA to communicate well-being to the DNA. And that way you get a two-prong approach. You are working with the cellular tissue, and you as a practitioner are working with, your client is working with the cellular tissue, and you as the practitioner work with the molecular RNA, DNA communication. And it's the RNA that communicates with the DNA and tells it and gives it the new code. So the communication, the information is actually in the RNA. So there you go. That's the formula.
Whew. I'm glad this is being recorded.
Me too.
We'll review that.
And you want to
later.
start out. Yeah, you want to start out with the frequency of love, truth, wellness, health, joy, and life in balance.
Yes, that's. I typically encourage. Again, that reframing away from pathology as other. All that occurs at the dense level of the physical body is communication. It's communication. Pain is communication. And
pain is the resistance, where the communication and he wants you to he wants to show you this image. If you, Molly, or the practitioner is working at the molecular level, and you are working with well-being in the molecular level, that comes up and starts communicating underneath the cellular tissue. And that way, when your client, whether they believe in the process or not, that no longer has an effect on the well-being of the cell. Because what you're doing is you're coming up from underneath, and it's bypassing their belief system. Because the pattern
good orientation.
The pattern within someone who's ill is, they don't feel good. They have fear, especially when the term cancer gets put in there, or terminal, or whichever. And so, coming up from beneath that, you're eliminating. Really, actually, you're eliminating the community as well, because the community has a certain belief system that they're placing on top of that cellular structure. And so you're coming in the back door. And it's helpful.
I would think that would not relieve the client, the patient, the person experiencing cancer from that the work required to choose differently that relationship that they're having with their body.
It doesn't. However, well, and it does too. It does.
It provides a new template. Yeah.
Well-being will work beneath any belief system, and what it does is it pushes up, because it goes through the body at the molecular level. It actually surfaces what no longer pertains. So someone can become more emotional, can become whatever,
they can have
so it's going to surface that information. And so teaching them to deal with their emotions is that emotions are energy in motion, and that this stuff is surfacing from the bottom. And well-being will work on its own. It is covert operation. It is a covert operation. And here's what, and he's asking me to give you an example of what happened with me. Is we started working with the True Nature of Light and Well-Being in Texas in 2011, and around there. And when I moved to Nevada in March of 2012, I could no longer. It was just automatic. It was an automatic. Oh, I'm drinking coconut milk, no longer drinking regular milk, with the growth hormones and all of that. That's what happens with well-being going in there and doing its job. Is it automatically brings the system, the mind, body, mind, into an alignment of thought process and choices.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so it's an easier, smoother transition. It is long term, because that process took a year and a half, 2 years for it to surface into my conscious awareness. And even then, it wasn't a conscious, I'm not going to, it wasn't a decision.
Right.
It was just the hand reached for the coconut milk, and I no longer want this other. And so it's a shift and it's a smooth transition, and it is long term. So just to let you know.
Yeah, well, that's helpful from the sense that, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you. It's what happens, I think, sometimes even in those really intending to work with their pathology, their whatever they're working with, from this level that, maybe they have this conscious awareness, this desire to come at this holistically. There is this habit that tends to be pervasive of being very self-aggressive in trying to heal. When you're trying to find the problem and you're digging for this thing you need to do differently, and it is very self-aggressive. So I like this notion of infusing from underneath, to press outward to be worked with, as opposed to digging downward. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and it engages the light system. It engages the entire holograph in the healing process, whereas humanly we tend to leave that out or not believe in it. We don't trust it. We don't recognize it, all this other stuff. So when you, especially as the light worker, as the healer, you know the process, you believe in the process. So your belief allows that process a clear space to do its job. And so eventually, the person who has been disengaged in their own system, eventually they're more easily able to accept their light at that point, and believe in themselves, and they'll have more breakthroughs faster, and they'll bring joy into their life sooner. And again, it is a process. I mean, what happens when things surface. They don't look so fun. They don't look so happy. But that is short-lived. It's short-lived because what happens in healing that underlayer is that then, because you're shifting the genetic information, because then when they go and they try to grab onto an old habit and an old pattern, it's like dust in their hands.
Exactly.
There's no foundation to it.
Right.
So it doesn't stick around. And, eventually it shifts the course.
And that's
well, actually, it shifts the course right at the very beginning. So
right,
go ahead.
Right. I was just saying that's a pattern I've noticed, and the way you articulated that in working with trauma. When old cellular, held at a cellular level, trauma is released, it's all of a sudden those old triggers and stuff. There's just nothing for them to grab onto anymore. Once that's been really metabolized out of the system, the same old situation will arise, and the hooks are gone. That
is so rewarding as the witness to that. It's just rewarding to I just, when that happens with people, I just clap. It's like I just feel like a little girl with giggles. It's so exciting when that old pattern has broken away. And and that's what we're doing on the surface here with the collective, with the bombings and all of that stuff, is we are breaking this stuff away. It's breaking apart. And, I have a lot of compassion for the misperceptions and misunderstandings and the pain for that people are going through. And I know the well-being that sits beneath all of that. It's just surfacing everything. And, you're talking about the digging and that, and it's the difference between doing and being. And being is where the power is.
Right. And just genuine self-compassion, just fostering and cultivating a genuine and deep self-compassion.
That is, I think that is the hardest thing for a human being to do. Is actioning self-compassion and maintaining it. We can choose it. We can have it momentarily. But to actually live it it's invaluable. And they're saying it's very pleasant to be around. From an energetic standpoint, it's very pleasant to be around. And so think about it. With these ethereal teams, whether you believe in angels or not, I mean, they want to be, energy wants to be around its pleasantry. Pleasant energy in love wants to be around pleasantness. Love doesn't want to be around this anger and all of that. It's much more enjoyable to have a pleasant conversation than an argument. So,
right. And I think that at the human emotional body level, the confusion and the paradox is that, and this is where we get into bypassing, is that this notion of being compassionate and one love and be compassionate is sometimes this really quick bypass to the, and then we just push that fear and the pain, we just push it down with these kind of spiritualized bypasses, which is probably a whole other show. But it's like,
yeah. Well, and it's easier to be compassionate for other people because we see them in their pain, and we don't even acknowledge our own pain. Acknowledging our own pain is it's just easier to look at everybody else. That's just
but it's that mystery as to why we'll keep what you were saying was that the energy that like attracts like, and so I find people who are very confused by the fact that they're still attracting pain into their life, and it's like, that's because you haven't really allowed yours to surface. So often I see spirituality used as a bypass mechanism, as just one more mechanism for escape, as opposed to the place that is inclusive of all of us, all of the parts of ourselves. I agree with that, but I also feel that spirituality is completely misunderstood. It's not a checking out point. Agreed.
And a lot of people use it as a checking out point.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, this spiritual journey has been the hardest job I've ever done.
Oh. Yeah.
I can hear, check. Don't get me started on this.
Yeah, check. Well, it reorients you, and I was just sharing with a group of friends last night that it can provide an experience of isolation. That becomes part of what one traverses when they've committed to evolution as path. Both, again, at the individual level and collective. It can at times feel isolating and completely connected at the same time. It's at the human emotional level, it can feel a little isolating. Less so
when I
for
wrote
me than it used to.
Yeah. Because eventually it comes out of that. And I think for me it's been cyclical. It's been isolation, not isolation, isolation,
right.
not isolation. So it's, it depends upon your path, your phases, all of that stuff. And when I wrote, the first book I wrote is called An Unseen Life, When the Extraordinary Becomes Ordinary. I wrote it in 2007 when my daughter was going through chemo, and I was not able to participate in helping them at all. And it was extremely difficult. And the book is about being in peace in a chaotic world, in a chaotic life, a chaotic experience. And so that dichotomy was going on of that extreme difficulty and yet extreme, detachment, but isolation and extreme connectedness. And so it's, it's a weird place to be in. It's also a beautiful place to be in, and it's a difficult place to be in. So, but there is another, you do get through those phases, and you do come out at the other side. There is another side to it. So it's the most difficult job I've ever done.
Yeah.
Well, we are a little over an hour now, and so we're going to close out the show. And Molly, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh.
I really appreciate it. And do you have anything that you'd like to, close with, or any messages just giving anyone?
Oh, I'm just grateful.
Any last questions?
Any last questions? Oh, well, I could go for hours with you. Maybe we'll have a conversation about working with children. That, like, when you first started, I was like, what? So another time, perhaps. I like personally, selfishly, I would like to understand what you're talking about. But in the broader perspective, I would just say it was just been delightful, and I'm really very grateful for having gotten to have this time and space and open this field together. And
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And we wish Mary well in her travels. Our next show is December 3rd, 2015, 10 a.m. And this is The Conversation Unscripted. I'm Ruth Evelyn. Mary will be with us next week, I believe, or next show, I believe. And our guest host has been Molly Wavra. Thank you very much, Molly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.